Welcome to History Lab. If you listened to our series Darlinghurst's AIDS crisis and you're missing Darlo already, here's an episode from our 2023 series Listen to Darlinghurst. This 6-part series by historian and producer Catherine Freyne is an immersive audio experience that takes you into many corners of the neighbourhood. Here we're sharing red light, green light. This episode looks at the history of sex work in Darlinghurst, and it won gold in the 2024 International Signal Awards in the Social Impact category.
Working on Premier Lane and William Street was exciting. The amount of activity that was going on back then.
When I first landed here in about 1982, it was shoulder to shoulder from Forbes here to Darling Street. You had to fight to get a room in one of those safe houses, you know. In fact, you'd go in and there'd be women and clients lined up along the hallway.
You could stand up by the Coca-Cola sign at King's Cross, look back into the city. All you could see was this long line of lights, bumper to bumper, all the way back to Town Hall. They were there for the nightlife, and they were there to see us, the glamour and, in some cases, the freaks.
My name is Judy Bates, sometimes also known as Darlo Debbie.
I'm Chantal Martin. I came over here in 1984 from New Zealand.
Here we are on Liverpool Street in East Sydney, which is, I guess, down memory lane for me.
Darlinghurst was where it was all happening. Bright lights, so for me it was excitement. It was also where I transitioned to become the woman who I am today. So I was around a lot of my sisters, some of whom were working down on Premier Lane. That was my introduction.
My connection with this area, and I guess more broadly sex worker rights, goes back a very long while. I was a young law clerk working in a Victorian law firm, and our clients at the time were brothel owners, sex workers, people who use drugs, drug dealers, and I would be their court support person. So, you know, I got to know a little bit about the industry from that side, but at some point I did jump the fence.
It came about because I had fallen behind on my rent and I had run out of money and I was about to get kicked out of my unit, and I spun around and said to one of the girls, we used to all drink at a hotel called the Rex Hotel and the Bottoms Up Bar, and I said to one of the girls, oh my God, I'm about to get kicked out. And they said, oh well girl, you're going to have to throw on a frock and get down there and sell your ass. And I said, oh, I couldn't do that, I couldn't possibly do that. And they said, oh, you can, yeah you can, we do that.
Inner city prostitution and soliciting were the main complaints of residents who attended the Sydney City Council's meeting last night. Good morning, Alderman Antcliffe.
Good morning, Mark.
I believe that you have a particular interest in the issue because you live in Darlinghurst yourself. How bad is it for a resident?
Oh, it's horrific, Margaret. It goes until all hours of the night. It's not the girls themselves. It's the trucks and traffic and hooliganism that goes until 3 o'clock in the morning. As a result, the residents cannot sleep. They've been under siege for 2 years.
From where we're standing now, we're looking east along Liverpool Street near the corner of Forbes and Liverpool. Probably 3 or 4 of these grand old terrace houses were used as safe houses. Safe houses were places that we would take our clients. So the beauty of that was you could be a street-based sex worker and work right outside where you're going to take your client. So there's no need to get in their car. But there's a hierarchy involved here. So if you were new, you had to pay your dues. So I remember my first night and one woman coming up to me saying to me, who are you? I said, oh, my name's blah, blah, and I'm just here to do a few jobs, you know. She said, well, get down the end there to work with the transgender women. Because they weren't allowed to work in the safe houses. They had to do all of their clients in cars because the men that ran those safe houses would not allow transgender women to work out of their houses. So I moved up to the corner and I'm looking, you know, at these very tall women looking down at me going, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And one of them said, "Nothing to worry about, you know, she's no competition."
We've got the trans workers, of course, which is my community. We were very protective of our area and where we work.
They became my best allies, and I guess I learnt a whole lot from them. They were mistresses of their trade.
There's a little bit of history here as well. When I started down on Premier Lane in 84, I was told by the girls that were there previous to me that the old working street used to be Boundary Street, down the back of St Vincent's Hospital. And then it was moved to Darley Street, and then eventually it came down to Premier Lane. And it was all moved because we were in the site of a residential area. At that time, there were a whole lot of new residents buying properties in that area without knowing that the history of Darlinghurst is that you're going to see a hooker on the street, and they could even be on your doorstep, you know. So the police were constantly getting called to come and move us on and stuff like that.
Then I got arrested, probably, you know, the first few nights of working here. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and as I'm stepping out to flag a taxi, this woman came out, and I'd seen her through the night. Petite woman. She looked a bit like Heidi. She just stepped down off the Matterhorn, milking the goats, you know. She was so gorgeous. So I stopped and chatted. Now, it just so happened at that moment, 2 off-duty Darlinghurst detectives were on their way home. And remember, 1979, they repealed the laws, street-based sex work was no longer illegal, but they could still get you with something. It's called obstructing traffic. So they arrested Heidi and me and took us to Darlinghurst Police Station. And therein is another horrific tale.
It was a time when you were never quite sure who you were going to encounter by jumping in and out of cars. 9 times out of 10 I was okay, and most of us were okay, but there were a few shaky times down there where some of the girls weren't so okay, you know, where they'd get abused. And the other thing about that time as well, we could never go to the cops to report any of that. In some cases, some of those police were the biggest perpetrators of what was happening to us. They would come down and they would round us up, whoever they caught on Premier Lane, and they would take our money off us and put us in a paddy wagon, and then they'd drive us out west. I remember getting dropped off at Parramatta with another girl, another trans worker, and we were told to find our own way back. And sort of like, okay, we're all dressed up in our hooker gear, right? We're all right out west, and back then, to be out there and to be you, who you are, wasn't the safest place for you to be, and they knew that. They knew that.
I started thinking there's got to be people looking out for our interests. Where are they? Who are they? Is there anyone? One night, on my corner down there on William and Burke Street, the Salvation Army came by again, offering me one more cold cup of tea and sympathy. And I said, no, thank you. And that's where I found some of the women that were working with the Australian Prostitutes Collective. I think within a couple of days of getting involved with them, and I remember the meeting was at the Women's Electoral Lobby, and found myself co-authoring our first submission for funding. So there was this small groundswell of really committed, passionate women, such as Ros Nelson and Jan Aitken and Roberta Perkins. So, you know, within 12 months, I suppose, of that, we managed to get funding.
I remember being down there one time when I'd never met Roberta Perkins before. All I saw when I got out in the client's car was this tall woman holding a clipboard, and I thought, who on earth is she? And then she opened her mouth and said, you, I need to talk to you. And I thought, oh my God, I don't know who this person is. And she would go, now, I'm with the University of so-and-so, and I'm doing some research on transgender sex workers, and I'd need a little bit of information from you, and, you know, she'd be a force to reckon with, right? And then she'd be asking these questions, and I thought, okay, I'll answer your questions so you can go away. So she did, and then a client dropped me back onto the street that same night. I saw her, and I said to the client, keep driving. You know? But I had no idea what it was going to mean I had no idea what she was doing was going to help me and other workers like me get the benefits from this.
This is the first place on the planet that decriminalised sex work, and that happened in 1995. It was the first time in the world where it had actually been decriminalised, and the city fathers had listened to the voices of sex workers telling the stories of their experiences. Just down here over William Street on the right-hand side was the last remaining safe house, the last stand of the safe houses that I did the DA for, development application. So after decriminalisation in 1995, brothels were no longer illegal and neither were safe houses. But to operate, you had to get consent from council. I did the DA for them, and then finally, after all those years of not allowing transgender women to work out of safe houses, the manager of that place allowed them into work. That was a really heartening thing to see at the end of all of this time. Finally, trans women would be treated equally in this kind of workplace, But as it turned out in the end, transgender women were the last women to work the street of Darlinghurst. Most people then went online.
It's changed because of social media. It's changed because of mobile phones. I mean, at the end of the day, wouldn't it be better to be sitting on your lounge in a nice warm house and having a client come to you rather than standing down on the street in the middle of winter with next to nothing on? Because that's what it was like for us. When they finally closed Premier Lane, what they did was they put bollards to stop traffic coming down Forbes Street, because see, the traffic used to flow from upper Forbes Street, come down, and it would hit the top of the stairs there, and you could either go left or right to go up Premier Lane. Okay, but now today you'll go down there and there's bollards there now. So there's some of the changes that happened to stop us from, stop our clients from going there, but you know what, clients will go wherever we are. There's a handful of workers that are out there now, but it's not what it used to be.
Well, we've come to our last stop, the corner of Stanley and Eurong, where they erected a statue of joy. If you've been to Amsterdam and you've seen the picture of the sex worker in the red light district there standing in a door frame, similar thing here. Louis Fraser was the artist. She obviously had some connection with sex workers of the time, because this is the heartland of sex work, and it's the heartland too of where the movement starts getting its legs. So Joy stood here not for a very long time. It seems that back in the mid-90s, a resident, a local from around here said, "This is offending me and I want it gone." So they removed Joy, and she's now in the sculpture garden at Macquarie University. I would like to start a campaign for Bring Back Joy. I mean, I really think she should be put back on her pedestal, because she was there in honour of all of the women who have ever toiled in sex work to make a living, to support their families, just an ordinary, hard-working woman that once upon a time was quite revered in this neighbourhood. It would be a beautiful way to respect that era and those women.
Hello again, history lovers. I have a little update for you about Joy. Producer Catherine Freyne teamed up with Julie Bates, whom you heard on the podcast, to return the Statue of Joy to its original place in Darlinghurst. That months-long campaign was successful. So if you're curious to meet her, you can visit Joy yourself. You'll find her on the corner of Stanley and Eurong Streets in Darlinghurst. To hear the rest of this wonderful series, search for Listen to Darlinghurst or scroll to episodes 18 to 23 of the History Lab podcast.